Imagine that you witness somebody stealing something and report it to the police. Imagine that, instead of arresting the person, the police accuse you of making up what you saw. Suppose that the police try to justify this by saying that the thief is called Jack, and there's a stereotype that people called Jack are thieves. So you must be stereotyping instead of telling the truth. Even if it's true that there's a stereotype that people called Jack are thieves, and that this stereotype is a big problem, do you think that the police would be right to dismiss your report? Let's explore inverse stereotyping to find out. As we saw in our earlier video on the topic, stereotyping is where people assume that a whole group of people are all the same in some way, even if they're not. Go and check that video out if you haven't seen it already. In that video, we imagined that there's a stereotype that anyone who's ever been called Jack is a thief. That meant that lots of people who were called Jack were treated as if they were thieves, even if they weren't. As we saw, if that were happening, it would be a big problem. So what's inverse stereotyping? Inverse stereotyping is where people assume that any claim that the stereotype is true of a particular person must be an instance of stereotyping, even if it's not. So to say, I don't believe that you saw Jack stealing because there's a stereotype that people called Jack are thieves, would be an example of inverse stereotyping. What's not inverse stereotyping, however, is just having the opposite stereotype or the same stereotype about a different group. So if you were to assume, for example, that everybody who's called Jill is a thief, or that nobody called Jack could be a thief, that would not be inverse stereotyping. That'd just be regular stereotyping. Superficially, it looks as though inverse stereotyping is the opposite of stereotyping. Some people claim that it's actually an answer to the problem of stereotyping. But if you think about it, you'll see that it's actually just the same thing. It's still people insisting on believing something even if it's not true. And it can be just as harmful as regular stereotyping, as well as making it harder to stop regular stereotyping. For example, suppose Jack, here, lives in a place where half the people have a stereotype that everyone called Jack is a thief, and the other half of the people have the stereotype that everyone who accuses anyone called Jack of stealing are making it up, no matter what the evidence. Would Jack have any incentive not to steal? Probably not. It would make no difference to how anyone would treat him, whether he stole anything. People from the first group would think that he were a thief, whether he stole anything or not. And people from the second group would refuse to believe that he were a thief, even if he were to steal. He still wouldn't have any control over his life. And he'd still be at risk of having his property stolen by other people called Jack, who have no incentive not to steal. Also, if inverse stereotyping were common, it would give people more of an incentive to have the original stereotype. If half the people can't be trusted to say whether someone called Jack is a thief, and anyone called Jack can often get away with stealing, it would be very easy to suspect people called Jack of theft. Also, it'd be easy for people in the first group to do double inverse stereotyping and assume that everyone pointing out their own stereotype were just doing it because they were inverse stereotyping. This would make it harder to stop the original stereotyping. It would probably also cause a lot of conflict between people in the two groups, each of whose members would probably mistrust the others, and each with good reason. The people doing the inverse stereotyping wouldn't be making the world a better place for anyone, especially not for anyone called Jack. They wouldn't be solving the problems caused by the original stereotyping. They'd be making them much worse. Sometimes people do inverse stereotyping because they want to appeal to the short-term interests of people who've been the victims of stereotyping to get political advantage for themselves. That's an example of problem hijacking. Check out our video on problem hijacking for more information on that. So if stereotyping is a real problem, what should you do instead of inverse stereotyping? Never believe that a claim about a person is true without evidence specific to that person. Never dismiss a claim about a person as false, despite good specific evidence that it's true. Always be rigorous in treating everybody as an individual. Have you come across any examples of inverse stereotyping lately? If you have, let us know in the comments. Click the like button, share to let other people know about inverse stereotyping, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one.